dearest listener, lean into the hush of Hawksmere's night, for the tale before us drips with sorrow and dread. Tonight we step into the shadowed tower where Lady Alianor finds herself imprisoned, her truth twisted into chains of despair. Imagine it, the heavy oak slamming behind her, the iron bolt sealing her fate, the silence so thick it smothers even hope. What is truth when spoken against power? A candle burning too brightly, too briefly, leaving only ash. Sir Roland de Mowbray is no longer content to roar before the crowds. He comes to her in quiet, armed with venom and cold calculation. He offers not freedom but a bargain. Recant your words, shatter your dignity, denounce the outlaw you defended, or rot in the tower, branded traitor, whore, and madwoman. Yet even in despair the heart clings to fragments of light. A whisper from below, a loyal maid's voice rising on the wind, bearing tidings both wretched and true. Blood stains the cobbles, and the price of Alianor's defiance may already have been paid. So, my dear confidants, let us open the ledger of Chapter 7, the price of truth. Let us weigh courage against survival, loyalty against betrayal, and ask, is truth a weapon or the pyre upon which one burns?
The sound was a physical blow, reverberating through the marrow of her bones and the ancient stones of Hawksmere's old gatehouse tower. The heavy oak door slammed shut behind Alianor, its thunderous finality echoing in the small, circular stone chamber like the ceiling of a tomb. Before the echoes could fully die, the thick iron bolt shot home with a jarring thunk from the outside. The sound was obscenely loud in the confined space, a punctuation mark to her capture. Dust, disturbed by her violent entrance, motes dancing in the single slit of gray light high on the wall, settled slowly, like ash after an explosion, filling her nostrils with the scent of decay and abandonment. She stumbled, catching herself against the rough cold stone. The impact scraped her palm, a minor sting lost in the overwhelming tide of shock and despair. The chill of the rock seeped instantly through the thin fabric of her mud-stained gown, a stark contrast to the fevered heat of the square. The air was thick with the smell of damp mortar, ancient dust, and neglect. The stale breath of forgotten things. Panic clawed at her throat. She spun, lunging towards the door, her fists pounding against the unyielding wood. "Let me out!" The cry was raw, desperate, swallowed by the thick oak and the heavier silence beyond. Only the faint, retreating crunch of boots on the spiral stairs outside answered her. Then, nothing. Utter, suffocating stillness. The chamber was bare, except for a crude pallet of straw in one corner, little more than a nest for vermin, and a slop bucket in another. The bucket's faint, acrid odor added another layer to the room's oppressive miasma. Her prison. The stark reality slammed into her. Roland's justice, not trial, not judgment, but swift, silencing incarceration. Leaning her forehead against the frigid door, the events of the square crashed over her anew, a relentless, brutal wave, the roar of the crowd, a living beast of shifting allegiances, the crush of bodies, smelling of sweat, fear, and unwashed wool. The guard's rough hands on her arms, pinching, impersonal, dragging her away like chattel. Roland's roar of fury and despair, not despair for her, but for his shattered control, his public humiliation. But most vividly, Eamon's eyes. In that final, fractured second, before the tide of guards engulfed him, she hadn't seen anger at her defense, nor even fear for himself. She'd seen pure, unadulterated devastation at the inevitable consequence. He'd known that her truth, her magnificent, defiant stand, was a death sentence for them both. She had told the truth, and it had doomed them. The realization was a cold knife, twisting in her gut. Hours bled into each other, viscous and meaningless, marked only by the slow creep of gray light across the floor as the afternoon sun filtered through the high slit, moved like a lethargic sundial, and the gnawing ache of fear and guilt that chewed at her insides. She paced the small circumference of the tower room, her boots scuffing the gritty stone, the repetitive motion, a futile attempt to outrun the whirlwind in her mind. What had become of Bess? Had her loyal maid been seized too, thrown into some dank cellar? Had she managed to flee? The thought of Bess suffering Roland's wrath because of her sent fresh waves of icy terror through Alianor. And Eamon. Roland's rage would be volcanic, boundless. What unspeakable vengeance would he exact? The image of him broken, bleeding, under Roland's boot or his torturer's tools haunted her. Was he already dead? The thought was a physical pain, stealing her breath. Roland's rage would be boundless. What vengeance would he exact? Each possibility was more horrific than the last. The profound silence was shattered by the sound of approaching boots on the stone stairs outside her door. Deliberate, heavy, unhurried. Not the shuffling tread of a guard delivering watery gruel. This was purpose. Predation. It sent her scrambling back against the far wall, pressing herself into the cold stone as if she could merge with it, become invisible. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. The scrape of the bolt was unnaturally loud. The door groaned open. Sir Roland de Mowbray himself filled the doorway. He had shed the rich velvet of the public spectacle, clad now in dark practical wool that seemed to absorb the meager light. Yet, the fury hadn't dissipated. It simmered beneath a new veneer, a layer of icy control more terrifying than his public rage. He carried no weapon, but his presence filled the cramped space like a physical weight. Weapon enough. He didn't enter fully, merely stood on the threshold, blocking the meager light, his tall frame dominating the opening. His shadow stretched long and menacing across the dusty floor towards her, a dark finger pointing accusingly. His eyes, dark pits in the gloom, raked over her disheveled state, the mud-stained gown clinging to her legs, the fine wool torn at the hem, the hair escaping its braid, tangled and matted with dust and sweat, the smudges of dirt on her face, the wide, fearful eyes she couldn't hide, the tremor in her hands she clenched into fists. His gaze was an assessment, cold and clinical, stripping her bare of dignity. A faint, cruel twist touched his lips. "Comfortable, Lady Alianor?" The question dripped with venomous sarcasm. His voice was dangerously soft, devoid of the booming theatrics of the square. It was a serpent's hiss, devoid of the booming theatrics of the square. It scraped against her nerves, setting her teeth on edge. She pressed her lips together, swallowing hard. She didn't answer, couldn't trust her voice not to betray her terror, not to crack and reveal the abyss of fear yawning within her. He took a single measured step inside. The door creaked shut behind him, plunging the chamber into near-total gloom, save for the shaft of gray light from the high slit, now illuminating swirling dust motes, stirred by his entrance. The space felt even smaller, charged with his contained violence. The air crackled with unspoken threat. "Your little performance in the square," he continued, his tone conversational, almost amused, as if discussing a poorly staged play, "was illuminating." Truly, he took another slow step, his boot crunching on grit. "The passionate defense of the outlaw," he spat the word, "the accusations hurled at your betters." A cold smile touched his lips. "The lies about wolves." He paused, letting the accusation hang. He chuckled, a dry, unpleasant sound, devoid of any warmth. "You possess a certain dramatic flair. Pity it's wasted on such base company." The dismissal, the casual cruelty, ignited a spark of defiance amidst her terror. "It wasn't a lie," Alianor forced out, her voice raspy, unused and strained. "He saved me." The words felt inadequate, a feeble shield against his scorn. Roland waved a dismissive hand, a gesture that swept away her words like cobwebs. "A convenient fiction, a desperate ploy to salvage your tattered reputation and justify your infatuation." He leaned forward slightly, spat the word with utter contempt. "Do you truly think anyone believes it? They saw only a noblewoman bewitched. His voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper, laced with malice, defending her brute lover against rightful authority. Sister Marjorie's testimony was quite compelling on that point. He took another step closer. The smell of him filled her nostrils, the cloves on his breath, a failed attempt to mask something harsher, the cold scent of leather and steel, the essence of power and violence. You have shamed Hawksmere. Each word was a hammer blow. You have shamed your late husband's memory. He paused, his gaze boring into hers. You have shamed yourself beyond redemption. He stopped barely an arm's length away. Alianor could feel the heat radiating from him, smell the faint sweat beneath the cloves. Alianor pressed harder against the unyielding stone, the rough surface scraping her back through the thin gown, wishing it would swallow her, hide her from that predatory gaze. But, Roland said, the word a sliver of false hope, his voice dropping to a near whisper, creating a chilling intimacy in the confined space, laced with a chilling intimacy. I am not without mercy, nor am I blind to the value of appearances. He held her gaze, letting the implication sink in. Mercy was conditional. Appearances were everything. He reached out, not to strike, but to touch a strand of hair that had fallen across her cheek. The gesture was horrifyingly intimate. She flinched violently, turning her head away as if scalded. His fingers hovered for heartbeat, a spider contemplating its prey, then withdrew slowly, curling into a fist at his side. The knuckles whitened. Your reckless words have created a problem, he stated flatly, the false intimacy vanishing, replaced by cold pragmatism. The villagers are unsettled, confused. He paced a small half circle, his shadow shifting grotesquely on the wall. Your defense of the thorn, your accusations against me, it sows discord. He stopped, facing her again, his eyes chips of obsidian. Discord I cannot tolerate. The finality in his voice was absolute. He paused, letting the silence thicken, become a suffocating blanket. This discord needs resolution. Public resolution. Alianor's blood ran cold. The cold seeped from the stone into her veins. What do you mean? Her voice was a threadbare whisper. You will recant, Roland said, his voice like iron, cold, hard, unyielding, publicly. Before the same assembly, he began to outline his script, each point a fresh brand. You will admit that you were overcome. He offered the words like poison candies. That grief, perhaps, or the outlaw's cunning manipulation, clouded your judgment. He took a step closer, invading her shrinking space. That your words about me, about the theft, about the wolf. His lip curled in a sneer of disgust. Were born of hysteria and misplaced loyalty to a servant. He leaned in, his eyes boring into hers, pinning her like an insect. You will denounce Eamon Thorne as the thief and the dangerous rogue he is. The demand hung in the air, vile and absolute. You will apologize to this community for the spectacle you caused. He paused, letting the weight of the expected humiliation settle. Then, the final blow, delivered with icy precision. And you will, his voice hardened, implacable, accept my proposal of marriage publicly as the only path to restore order and security to Hawksmere. The enormity of his demand stole her breath. It wasn't just capitulation, it was annihilation. He wanted her not just to lie, but to utterly destroy herself and Eamon with her own words, to become his mouthpiece, his puppet, the willing instrument of his absolute victory, to stand before the people who had witnessed her moment of courage and spit on it, on Eamon's sacrifice, on her own soul, to become the instrument of his complete victory, and then to crawl into the gilded cage and lock the door herself, to bind herself to the architect of Eamon's destruction, the thief of Hawksmere, her personal tormentor. The price of survival was her complete self-betrayal. Revulsion, pure and scalding, surged through her. Never, she whispered, the word of fragile defiance, barely audible, but resonating in the stillness of her heart. The reaction was instantaneous, volcanic, Roland's fist slammed against the stone wall beside her head. The impact was thunderous, dislodging a shower of grit and dust that rained down onto her hair and shoulders. She cried out, shrinking away, instinctively throwing her arms up, bracing for the blow that didn't land on her flesh, but on her spirit. Dust filled her mouth, gritty and choking. "Never is a luxury you cannot afford," he snarled, the icy control shattering into shards of raw, spitting fury. His face contorted, veins standing out on his temples. "Look around you. This is your reality." He gestured violently at the bare, filthy walls, the straw pallet, the slop bucket. "You are nothing without my sufferance. Hawksmere is crumbling." He took a step closer, his voice a lash. "Your senile father-in-law signs whatever I place before him. Your servants scatter like rats. Your precious maid." He paused, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "Where is she, Alianor? Hiding? Begging?" He leaned in, his breath hot on her face. "Do you think she can save you?" The question hung, heavy with threat. Then he grabbed her chin, his fingers like iron vices, forcing her to look at him. The pain was sharp, immediate. His fingers dug in painfully. "Do you think anyone can save you now?" His voice dropped to a venomous hiss. "Your outlaw hero?" He laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "He's likely dead in a ditch, or wishing he was after my men finished with him." The image of Eamon, broken and bleeding, flooded her mind with horrifying clarity. His strong features battered, his defiant eyes extinguished, his body discarded like refuse. A fresh wave of agony, colder and deeper than fear, washed over her, stealing her breath. Had Roland already done it? Had he killed Eamon while she was being dragged up these stairs? The possibility felt horrifyingly real. Was this her fault too? "Your choices are simple," Roland hissed, his face inches from hers, his eyes burning with malevolent triumph, savoring her pain. His breath was hot, his eyes burning with malevolent triumph. "Recant. Marry me. Retain the title, the semblance of dignity, the safety of my walls around you." He painted the cage with gilded lies. Or he released her chin with a shove that sent her stumbling backwards, crashing against the cold wall. "Remain in this tower. Rot." He spat the words. "While I take Hawksmere anyway, strip it bare, sell its stones." He straightened, smoothing the front of his dark wool tunic with exaggerated care, smoothing his tunic, the mask of control sliding back into place, colder than ever. "And when I am done, you will be turned out, branded a madwoman, a traitor, an outlaw's whore." Each label was a lash, destitute and utterly alone. He took a step back toward the door, his gaze sweeping over her crumpled form with utter disdain. "Think on it. You have until dawn tomorrow. The assembly will gather at prime." He paused at the threshold, a dark silhouette against the faint light from the stairs. "Choose wisely, Lady Alianor." His final words were a contemptuous epitaph for her defiance. "Your fire," he added, his lip curling in contempt, "has burned itself to ash. All that remains is the choice of how you wish to be swept away." He turned and strode to the door, rapping sharply. The sound was like a gunshot. The bolt shot back, and he was gone, swallowed by the gloom of the stairwell. The door creaked shut, followed by the jarring thunk of the bolt being driven home once more. He was gone, leaving her alone in the stifling silence, the echo of his threats ringing louder than the slamming door. They vibrated in the stones, echoed in the hollow space where her courage had been. She slid down the wall, her legs giving way, collapsing onto the cold, dusty floor. The impact jarred her bones, but it was nothing compared to the crushing weight descending upon her spirit. The enormity of it crushed her. Her truth, her one weapon, her moment of defiant clarity in the square, had been turned against her with brutal efficiency. Truth had been her defiance, her weapon, and Roland had turned it into the pyre on which he would burn her and everything she cared about. Eamon was almost certainly dead or broken. Bess was lost, hunted, terrified. Hawksmere was his, its heart ripped out, its legacy perverted. Recant, lie, become his puppet, stand before them all and call Eamon a thief, a rogue, deny his courage, his protection, brand him the villain Roland painted him to be. Apologize for defending truth. Marry the man who framed Eamon, who threatened her, who saw her only as land and a vessel. Bind herself to her jailer, her tormentor, the murderer of the man Her thoughts stuttered, refusing to articulate the feeling, but the raw, bleeding wound of his loss was undeniable, or face utter ruin, destitution, and the world's contempt. Branded mad, a traitor, a whore, cast out with nothing, not even her name, utterly alone, hopelessness, a black suffocating tide, rose and engulfed her. Tears, hot and shameful, finally came, streaming down her face, carving paths through the grime of the square and the dust of the tower. She wept for Eamon, for his stolen life, his brutal end, for the courage he'd shown her, for Bess, her loyalty, her peril, for the freedom she'd glimpsed and lost in the forest, in her moment of defiance, for the crushing weight of Roland's power that seemed as immovable as the tower walls. She wept until her throat was raw and her eyes burned, great heaving sobs that racked her frame. Curled into a ball on the unforgiving stone, she was a broken doll, discarded in the dust. The gray light from the high slit fading into dusk, painting the walls in shades of bruise, then into the profound blackness of the tower night. The darkness was absolute, a physical presence pressing in, matching the desolation within. Sleep was impossible. Every nerve was raw, stretched taut. Every rustle in the straw pallet made her flinch, imagining rats, or worse. Every distant shout from the bailey below sent jolts of fear through her. Was it Roland's men? Had they found Bess? Was that a cry of pain? Her mind conjured horrific images of Eamon's fate, the sounds Roland had hinted at, the shouts, the terrible impacts, played out behind her eyes, fueled by his cruel words. She saw him dragged into the stables, heard the thud of fists, the crack of bone, saw the sacking dragged out, heavy and wet, fueled by Roland's cruel words. The images were relentless, a torturous loop. Then, cutting through the thick blanket of despair and the muffled sounds of the night, she heard it. Not from the door, not the heavy tread of guards, but faintly, drifting up from the courtyard below. A voice, ragged and desperate, choked with tears. "Milady, milady." Bess' hope, sharp and painful, lanced through the numbness. Alianor scrambled to her feet, stumbling in the pitch blackness, hands groping blindly for the wall, orienting herself towards the faint outline of the window slit. Rushing to the narrow window slit, she stretched up on tiptoe, pressed her face against the cold stone, peering down into the moon-washed courtyard far below. The moon cast long, stark shadows. The guard Roland had posted at the base of the tower stairs was visible, a dark shape leaning against the wall, seemingly dozing or bored. And near the well, partially hidden in shadow, was another figure, small, hunched, looking frantically up towards the tower windows. Bess, alive, free, for now. "Bess," Alianor hissed as loudly as she dared, her voice raspy from tears and disuse, her heart hammering against her ribs. "I'm here." The small figure flinched, then looked up directly, moonlight catching the pale oval of her face. "Milady! Oh, thank the saints!" Bess's voice was a broken whisper carried on the cold air, thin and terrified. "They wouldn't let me near. They said you were confined. Are you hurt?" The concern in her voice, amidst her own fear, was a balm and a fresh wound. "No, Bess, no. Just imprisoned," Alianor whispered back, forcing calm she didn't feel. "Are you safe? What's happening?" The urgency vibrated in her hushed tone. The answer came on a sob. They took him, milady." Bess's voice hitched. "After the square. The guards? They dragged Master Thorne away." She pointed a trembling hand towards the stable block. a dark hulk across the yard. Towards the stables. Bess shuddered, wrapping her arms around herself. There was shouting. Terrible sounds. She paused, the memory too vivid. Then they dragged something out, covered in sacking. Her voice dropped to a horrified whisper. Oh, milady, there was so much blood on the cobbles. Blood on the cobbles, Roland's taunt echoed. He's likely dead in a ditch. Confirmation. The fragile hope shattered completely. A sob tore from Alianor's throat, raw and guttural. Eamon. Gone. Brutalized. Murdered for protecting her. For being an obstacle to Roland's ambition. For being kind. Murdered because she had drawn attention to him in the square. The last ember of hope sputtered and died, leaving only cold, ashen despair. He was truly lost. The forest sanctuary, the shared danger, the fierce protectiveness, all gone, extinguished in violence. Grief threatened to swallow her whole, but Bess was still down there, exposed. Alianor clenched her fists, nails biting into her palms, using the pain to focus. Bess, listen to me, she whispered fiercely, forcing down her own grief, clinging to the thread of her maid's voice. You must get away from here. Now. Away? But milady, where? How? Go to Father Clement. It was a desperate gamble, the only flicker of resistance left. Tell him everything. She poured the urgency into her whisper. About the herbs Sister Marjorie stole. About the wolf. How Eamon saved me. About Roland's threats against me. Against Hawksmere. About this. She gestured futilely at the tower. Everything. He must help. He's the only one who might what? She thought desperately. Stand against Roland? Offer sanctuary? Bear witness? Father Clement? Bess sounded bewildered, terrified. But Sir Roland's men are everywhere. Watching the gates, the village. And Sister Marjorie. She watches like a hawk. The nun's zealous piety was now a tool of Roland's surveillance. Please, Bess, Alianor pleaded, her voice cracking with the strain of whispering urgency and crushing sorrow. Try. It's our only chance. She saw the guard shift against the wall, his head lifting slightly. Panic flared. Go, now! Before the guard sees you. Below, Bess hesitated, a small, frightened shadow caught between loyalty and terror. She looked towards the dozing guard, then back up at the dark slit of the window. The moonlight caught the sheen of tears on her cheeks. Then, with a final, desperate look upwards, a look that spoke of fear, determination, and heartbreaking loyalty, she melted back into the deeper shadows near the stables and was gone, swallowed by the night. Alianor sank back from the window, sliding down the wall to the floor again. The brief surge of adrenaline drained away, leaving her weak and trembling. The cold stone leached the last warmth from her body. The silence rushed back in, heavier now, filled with the terrible knowledge Bess had brought. Eamon was dead, murdered by Roland. The reality was a physical ache, a hollow emptiness where defiance had briefly flared. Bess was risking her life on a desperate, likely futile, errand. Father Clement was old, cautious, unlikely to defy the Regent openly. He might offer Bess sanctuary, but could he challenge Roland? Doubt, cold and insidious, crept in. Dawn was coming, relentless and cruel, bringing the assembly, bringing Roland's ultimatum. The truth had cost Eamon his life. Her moment of courage had signed his death warrant. The bitter irony choked her. Would recanting save Bess? Or would Roland, once he had Alianor's public submission and Hawksmere secured, dispose of the inconvenient maid anyway? Or would it simply make her Roland's accomplice in his murder? To stand before them all, to renounce Eamon, to call him thief and rogue, to deny his sacrifice, it would be spitting on his grave. To then accept Roland, his murderer, as her husband, it was a desecration. To save her maid, her own skin, the shell of Hawksmere, she would have to stand before them all and spit on Eamon's memory, brand him a thief, deny his courage, and embrace the monster who killed him. The ashes of her fire felt colder than the tower stone. Roland's final, contemptuous words echoed in the darkness. Your fire has burned itself to ash. He was right. Her defiance was spent, drowned in Eamon's blood. All that remained was the terrible, soul-crushing choice: survive by becoming a lie, a hollow, broken vessel mouthing Roland's words, living a gilded nightmare, or perish, clinging to a truth that had already been drowned in blood. To die here in the tower, or die slowly in the world's scorn, but with the truth, however futile, intact. The darkness of the tower pressed in, absolute, offering no answers, only the relentless approach of dawn and the ghostly, haunting echo of Bess's terrified whisper, so much blood, the blood of truth, the blood of courage, the blood that demanded payment, and the dawn that offered only two kinds of death.
And so the night thickens around Hawksmere, and Lady Alianor sits in the tower's gloom with her choice etched in blood and sorrow. Roland has carved her path with threats and venom. Recant before the crowd, denounce her outlaw, and bind herself in marriage to her captor, or cling to truth and perish in the silence of stone. Bess, the ever-faithful, runs through shadows carrying a desperate plea to Father Clement. But what sanctuary can frail hope offer against a man who controls soldiers, priests, and lies alike? And what of Eamon Thorne, outlaw, protector, lover? His name already sullied, his body perhaps broken beyond recognition, his sacrifice twisted into proof of guilt. Dawn waits, merciless as ever. At prime, the assembly will gather, eager for scandal, for spectacle, for blood. And Alianor, she must stand before them all. Will she speak Roland's words or her own? Mark it well, dearest listener. In Hawksmere, truth is never free. It is bought with loyalty, sealed with betrayal, and paid for in blood. And in Chapter 8, we shall see what remains of courage when the sun rises over the gallows of reputation.